welcome to Wrap Up. So, not too bad of a performance today. 4-1 is not bad. We did have some clunky draws here early and a little bit in the middle, but we also drew very well in some of our games, particularly well. I think better than average overall. So that's certainly worth mentioning to maybe taper our result a little bit. I do think that there's a reasonable shell here. I think that this is an archetype worth exploring further. There's a lot of different ways to build Eldrazi shells, and it's possible a green-black based one could be worth being involved in. I think, to me, the biggest appeal to a green-black Eldrazi deck, and consequently one of the bigger shortcomings, perhaps, of this particular list is that we aren't really abusing the fact that we get to play discard alongside our Thought-Knot Seers very well. We do only have the 2 Thoughtseize here, and then just another 2 Thoughtseize present. So only 2 discard spells outside of Thought-Knot Seer in our main, and only 4 in our 75 total. I'm curious if that isn't something we should be leaning on harder. If that isn't really, to me, that would seem like the appeal to going this direction. Maybe that's not really where this wants to be. Again, obviously, I definitely trust Edel's opinion on this deck list. But I'm curious if a list built in that general direction wouldn't be better. So that's something I might want to explore. And then the other potential thing that I could see myself interested in was maybe finding a way to use Wasteland Strangler a little bit. Bear of Silence was not bad for us today. It was better for me today than it was the one other previous day. Now, again, I shouldn't mention alongside all the other things that I obviously don't have that many matches with this list. I've played 15 matches now with this deck list, so my sample size is obviously particularly small. So we might, want to sort of taper my opinion a little bit. Take my opinion with a grain of salt, perhaps. Even more than you usually might. That said, I think an Abzan list could also be something we're potentially interested in. It feels like having Displacer is appealing, but at that point, maybe having Drowner is appealing, and then we're banned Eldrazi all of a sudden. So maybe that's not really the right way to go. You could also, I guess, play Abzan, and that gives you the I guess that doesn't really do anything. I was going to say there is that Eldrazi Displacer, and then there's the larger 6-mana Eldrazi that produces 3 Scions, like a 3/3 Eldrazi that makes 3 Scions. For the quote-unquote combo, we would obviously have to include a 3rd piece, and I don't think that would possibly be worth it in our deck. Yeah, I don't really see... having to include, some kind of Blood Artist effect is likely just too detrimental for that to really be a consideration for our deck. So, anyway, maybe Abzan not terribly exciting. Maybe you just want to stick with black-green. So that said, maybe my best suggestion for further tuning would be a more discard-based list. The Veils were fine for me today. Again, I did mention at the beginning that Edel had perhaps said that they were not as good as he had hoped, but I would continue to test with them in the 75, I think. Last Hope, though, could be in our main. Last Hope is pretty appealing in an Eldrazi deck where we can recur things like Thought-Knot Seers or Reshapers. Our stuff's already kind of hard to deal with, right? Which does mean that most of the time when it's getting dealt with, it's getting path, but that's not always the case, right? I mean, there's Supreme Verdicts, Thought Knot Seers, and Matter Shapers do get fatal pushed. It's not all. I mean, things die in combat, right? It's not always path, but that might be something worth testing in the main at all as well. So I think there's a lot of reasonable things you could test, but again, just to sort of reiterate my primary point, I think the best reason to be in this shell is discard, and if that's the case, why don't we have more? I like the idea of having my Eldrazi beatdowns alongside Thoughtseize, maybe even Inquisition and Thought Knot Seer. That sounds kind of great, you know. Then I mean, because we're already kind of like Jundrazi, right, or black-green Drazi, right? We're already kind of that like black-green mid-range deck. We just took out all our regular threats and just jammed all these Eldrazi in. So why not play maybe a full package of discard? Might be problematic alongside a full package of birds and stirrings, and that might really be why we're there. But I mean, if these were actually no good and playing 4 Endbringers is a lot, you know, maybe we find ourselves like cutting these 5 cards to play like the package of 7 discard spells. You know, where would that take us? Maybe it would be terrible. is the short answer, right? Maybe then our birds are kind of weird. You know, maybe we find ourselves with weirder opening hands. Our top decks probably get a lot worse, right? I mean, we've cut like Liliana Endbringer, makes our Mana Reshapers probably a bit worse. You know, you did see us twice today hit a Liliana off Mana Reshaper, and that's just backbreaking. Now, I think the likelihood of that happening is pretty small. It's probably not a great reason to like continue to have Liliana in your deck. But that also means we could explore like a list that just had a lot more Lilianas. I mean, we could explore a list that had more dorks. Maybe the appeal of being black isn't discard. Maybe the appeal of playing black is turn to Liliana. And if that's the case, maybe we should play a lot more Lilianas. Maybe we play Noble Hierarch alongside our bird or something. Probably not. Noble Hierarch into Liliana of the Veil has to be very difficult in this deck. Even with triple Twilight Mire, I think just the presence of like Eldrazi Temple and Cavern of Souls just makes that so hard that probably wouldn't be a reasonable place to go. Anyway, I feel like I'm kind of perhaps rambling for too long on the subject, but I just kind of want to go into where we might want to tune this in the future, and those are my initial thoughts. So if you're interested in playing this deck, I would definitely recommend trying it out. It's a lot of fun. I think these 2-color Eldrazi decks have some potential. They just need a little bit of tuning, a little bit of work, if somebody's willing to put that work in. But either way, I appreciate you watching these videos today, and I hope I will see you next time. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and like I said, see you in the next video.